I was sitting on the cold floor in my white wedding dress, holding my arms tightly around myself, crying so hard I could barely breathe. My hair was still curled. My veil had fallen halfway across the room. My makeup was ruined, and I felt like I wasn't alive anymore. Because just minutes ago, my own father did something no father should ever do. He abused me. On the night before my wedding, he came into my room when everyone had gone to bed. He said he wanted to talk. I didn't think much of it. He was my father. But what he did, what he said, what he took from me, I will never forget it. I begged him to stop. I told him I loved someone else. I told him I was getting married tomorrow. But he didn't care. He held me down and told me I was his. That I would always be his. That no one else deserved me. When it was over, he stood up and told me not to say a word. He said, "They won't believe you. You'll ruin your life." Then he left just like that, leaving me lying there like trash. But before I could even wipe the blood off my legs, before I could stand to scream or run, I heard his footsteps again. He was coming back. Let me take you to where this all began. My name is Grace and I'm 79 years old today. I have soft silver hair, a little garden in my backyard, and 3 grandchildren who think I'm the kindest woman in the world. Every Sunday I sit on the same wooden bench in church and sing hymns like nothing ever happened. But deep down, I carry a story no one sees. A story that started with love and ended with a nightmare. I grew up in a quiet town. Everyone smiled. Everyone waved. But no one ever saw behind closed doors. My mother died when I was 10. A bad sickness took her fast. After that, it was just me and my dad. He was a proud man, strong, tall, respected by the whole town. People called me lucky. At least your daddy stayed, they would say. He loves you so much. And I believed them. For a long time I thought I had the best father in the world. He was strict. Very strict. He didn't let me play outside for too long. He didn't like it when I talked to boys. He always wanted to know where I was, who I was with, what I was wearing. I thought that was just how dads were. He would say things like, "You don't need friends. You have me." Or, "Boys only want one thing. I'm the only one who will protect you." At first, I felt lucky to have a father who cared so much. But as I grew older, his care started to feel heavy. When I was 16, he would walk into my room without knocking. Sometimes he would sit on the edge of my bed at night and say, "I just want to make sure you're safe." But he would sit too close. His hand would touch my knee and stay there. If I moved away, he'd get upset. Still, I kept quiet, because I loved him, and I didn't want to believe he was doing anything wrong. Then when I turned 24, I met Joseph. He was gentle, kind, and patient. He worked at a bookstore and loved to write poems. He always brought me flowers. Not fancy ones, just wildflowers he picked himself. He listened when I spoke. He never raised his voice. He made me feel like I was more than just someone's daughter. We fell in love slowly, deeply, quietly. And one day, he asked me to marry him. I said yes. He was the only man who ever made me feel truly seen. I told my father that Joseph proposed. I was shaking when I said it. My father didn't smile. He didn't say congratulations. He just stared at me for a long time. Then he said, "You don't need him. You're mine." I laughed nervously and said, "Dad, he loves me. I love him too." He just walked out of the room. After that, he barely spoke to me. But I kept planning the wedding. My aunt came from out of town to help. We picked out a simple but beautiful dress. My friends were excited. The church was decorated with white roses. Everyone was happy, except my father. The night before the wedding, I stayed in my room to rest. My aunt and cousins were downstairs finishing decorations. My room was quiet, filled with soft candlelight. I sat in front of my mirror, looking at myself in the dress I'd wear the next day. Then there was a knock. It was him. He asked if he could come in. I nodded slowly. He walked in and closed the door. Then he locked it. I turned in my chair and said, "Dad? What's wrong?" He sat on the bed and patted the space beside him. I didn't want to, but I sat. He looked at me with strange eyes. He said, "You're leaving me tomorrow." I smiled and said, "I'm getting married, but I'll still come visit. I'll always love you." He shook his head. "No," he said. "You belong to me. I froze. He stood up, walked toward me, and placed his hand on my cheek. I pulled back. He grabbed my arm. I tried to run. He pushed me down on the bed. I screamed. He covered my mouth. I kicked, I scratched, but he was too strong. And then he did the unthinkable. When he was done, he looked at me and said, "Don't tell anyone. You'll ruin everything. No one will believe you. And if you do, I'll kill him." Then he walked out. I lay there in silence, curled up, shaking, bleeding, broken. I couldn't cry. I couldn't move. I stared at the ceiling, my heart shattered into a million pieces. And just when I thought it was over, I heard his footsteps again. He was coming back. But this time, before he opened the door, there was a loud knock. The knock on the door was loud and sharp. I froze where I was on the bed, my body still shaking, my face wet with silent tears. I didn't know who it was, but I prayed with all my heart that it wasn't him again. I held my breath, staring at the door, afraid it would swing open and he'd be standing there again with those cold, dark eyes. Then I heard a soft voice. It was my cousin Emily. "Grace? Are you okay?" Auntie said she thought she heard a noise. I jumped off the bed and rushed to the door. My legs were weak, but I forced them to move. I wiped my face quickly, even though it didn't help much. My eyes were red and swollen. My lip was bleeding slightly where I had bitten it. I didn't want Emily to see me like that, but I needed someone, anyone. I unlocked the door with shaking hands and opened it just a little. Emily looked at me and gasped. "Grace, what happened to you?" I fell. I lied quickly. I tripped over my veil. "It's nothing." But Emily wasn't a fool. She stepped inside and looked around. She saw the broken glass on the floor, the way the bedsheets were pulled, the fear in my eyes. Then she said something that made my heart stop. "Was Uncle here?" I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. My throat felt like it was full of stones. My body went cold all over again. Emily stepped closer. "Grace, tell me the truth. Did something happen?" I just nodded. She didn't ask more. She didn't press. She just pulled me into her arms and held me tight. And I cried. I cried so hard my whole body shook. She stroked my back and whispered, "It's not your fault. It's not your fault." That was the first time someone said those words to me. Not your fault. Because for a moment I had believed it was. I had believed maybe I said something wrong, wore something wrong, smiled too much, or loved someone else too openly. But in that moment, with Emily's arms around me, I finally knew the truth. He had done something evil, and I had done nothing to deserve it. Emily helped me sit down and brought me a towel. She cleaned my face and asked if I wanted to call off the wedding. My mind screamed yes, but my mouth said no. I didn't want Joseph to know. I didn't want to ruin everything. I had dreamed of this wedding since I was a girl. I wanted it to be special. I wanted to be happy, if only for a day. So I told her not to say anything. She didn't agree, but she promised. The next morning, I woke up early. My whole body felt sore. I walked like I had weights on my legs. I stood in front of the mirror and looked at the dress. It still looked beautiful, but now it felt heavy, like it was holding all my pain. Emily came in to help me get dressed. She kept giving me little nods, soft smiles, but I could see the sadness in her eyes too. She knew. And she didn't forget. We arrived at the church. It was filled with flowers, candles, and music. People were smiling and taking pictures. Joseph stood at the front of the aisle in a black suit, his eyes shining with love. I smiled back. But when I turned to walk down the aisle, I saw him, my father, standing at the end of the row, ready to take my arm and walk me forward. I froze. My whole body stiffened. Emily whispered in my ear, "You don't have to." But everyone was watching. I didn't want to cause a scene. I didn't want people to ask questions. So I took his arm. And with every step we took together, my stomach turned. When we reached Joseph, my father leaned close and said, "You're mine, no matter what dress you wear." Then he kissed my cheek and walked away. I nearly fainted. But Joseph took my hand, and in his eyes I saw love. Pure, true, honest love. He had no idea the storm I was carrying inside me. He only saw the woman he wanted to marry. So I stood tall and I said my vows. We were married. I smiled through the pain. I laughed at the party. I danced when the music played. but inside I was broken. A few weeks after the wedding, something strange started happening. I felt tired all the time. I couldn't keep food down. My head hurt and I was always dizzy. Joseph thought maybe I was stressed, but I knew something was wrong. So I went to the clinic alone. The nurse ran tests. She came back with a big smile on her face. "Congratulations," she said. "You're pregnant." The room spun. I smiled back weakly, but inside I was screaming. This wasn't Joseph's child. This was my father's child. I went home and sat in silence for hours. Joseph came in later and kissed my forehead. "Are you okay?" he asked. I nodded. He touched my stomach and whispered, "I'm going to be the best dad in the world." And I burst into tears. I couldn't tell him. I couldn't break his heart. I just cried and he held me thinking it was joy. But it was grief. Pure grief. I tried to convince myself that maybe, just maybe, I could forget what happened. That I could love this child anyway. That I could raise it with Joseph and pretend it was his. But then one evening as I was folding clothes in the bedroom, I saw a shadow outside the window. It was my father. He was standing at the edge of our yard watching me, and in his eyes I saw a threat. I stepped back from the window as soon as I saw him. My heart started pounding in my chest like a drum. My hands turned cold and my legs shook beneath me. It had been weeks since the wedding. I hadn't seen or spoken to him since that terrible night. Yet here he was, standing just outside our fence, staring at me like I still belonged to him. I quickly pulled the curtain shut. I didn't want Joseph to see. He was in the kitchen, humming as he prepared dinner. He had no idea that the man standing outside our home, the man who had given me away at the altar, was the same one who had stolen everything from me. I leaned against the wall, breathing hard. My belly was growing now. The baby was about 3 months along. Joseph still thought it was his. And I still hadn't told anyone the truth, not even Emily. I didn't know what to do. I stayed in the room for a while, pretending to be looking for something in the drawer. But my mind was spinning. What if he came to the door? What if he tried to talk to Joseph? What if he told him something? Anything, to destroy our marriage? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the ceiling, my hands on my stomach, asking myself the same question over and over again. What if the baby looks like him? The next morning Joseph went to work and I stayed home. I was folding laundry when there was a knock at the door. My whole body froze. I didn't move at first. I prayed it was the mailman or a neighbor. But then I heard the voice. "Grace. It's me." I covered my mouth to stop myself from screaming. It was him. My father. I backed away from the door like it was fire. He knocked again, softer this time. "Grace, open the door. I just want to talk." Talk? About what? What more was there to say? I didn't move. I stood still and held my breath. Then he said something that made my knees weak. "I know you're pregnant." Silence. My heart dropped. How did he know? Did someone tell him? Had he guessed? Or was it because of the way I looked that day at the window? He continued. "That baby, it's mine. You and I both know it. You can't keep pretending it's his." Tears rushed to my eyes. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to tell him to leave me alone forever. But my voice was gone. My courage was gone. He spoke again. "You don't want this to get ugly, do you?" And just like that, I understood what he was doing. He was threatening me. I stepped closer to the door and shouted with everything inside me. "Go away. If you come back, I'll call the police." There was silence. Then his footsteps faded. I peeked through the curtain and saw him walking away slowly, like he wasn't afraid at all. Like he knew he still had power over me. I locked every door and window in the house that day. When Joseph came home, I smiled and pretended everything was fine. We ate dinner together. He talked about his day. I nodded and laughed when I had to, but inside I was falling apart. That night I couldn't sleep again. I kept thinking about what my father had said. That the baby was his. That I couldn't hide it. What if he came back? What if he tried to take the baby away? What if he told Joseph and destroyed everything? The next few weeks passed slowly. I started getting sick more often. The doctor said it was normal pregnancy sickness, but I knew it was the stress. I started writing in a notebook, pouring my heart into the pages just to stay sane. I still hadn't told Joseph the truth. I wanted to many times. But every time I looked into his eyes I saw love. Real love. The kind I had always wanted. And I couldn't bear to see that love turn into pain. One afternoon Emily came to visit. She brought baby clothes she had sewn by hand. Tiny socks, soft little hats. She hugged me tightly and said, "You're going to be a great mother." I smiled but my eyes filled with tears.
Emily, he whispered, "I'm scared."
She looked at me with worry. Did he come back? I nodded. He knows. He knows everything. He said the baby is his. Emily's face turned red with anger. That man is sick. You need to tell Joseph. He deserves to know. I shook my head. I can't. He'll hate me. He'll think I lied. He'll leave me. Emily took my hand. He won't. And even if he does, it's not your fault, Grace. You didn't ask for this. You were a victim. But I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a liar. I told Emily I needed time. She hugged me again and said, "Whatever you decide, I'll be here. You're not alone." That night I lay awake again, staring at the ceiling. I looked at Joseph sleeping beside me, so peaceful, so unaware. I touched my belly gently. The baby moved. Just a little flutter. It made my chest tighten with emotion. Even though this child came from pain, I knew it was innocent. It didn't ask to be born this way. It didn't carry his evil. It was mine. And I would love it. But the very next morning, something happened that changed everything. Joseph came into the bedroom holding a piece of paper. His face was pale. His hands were shaking. "Grace," he said quietly. "What is this?" He handed me the letter. It was a note, written in my father's handwriting. And it said, "I told you she was mine before she was yours." I stared at the note in Joseph's hand. My heart thudded so loud I could barely hear anything else. The words were clear, written in that familiar, sharp handwriting I had grown up seeing on birthday cards and school permission slips. "I told you she was mine before she was yours." Joseph looked at me, waiting. His eyes weren't angry, not yet, but they were confused, scared, like he had just been handed a piece of a puzzle that didn't fit. "Grace," he said again, more gently this time, "what does this mean?" I opened my mouth but my throat was dry. The words wouldn't come. I wanted to lie, to make something up that would make it all go away, but nothing came to mind. All I could do was stare at the paper and shake my head. "I don't know," I whispered. I don't know." But Joseph didn't believe me. He sat down on the bed slowly, still holding the note. "This was in our mailbox this morning."
"No stamp."
"Just folded and tucked inside. It wasn't there last night." He paused, then looked up at me again. "Who wrote it?" I turned away from him and walked to the window. I couldn't face him. My chest was tight, my stomach was twisting. "It was him," I finally said. "My father." Joseph stood up quickly. "What do you mean, your father? Why would he write something like this?" I closed my eyes and tried to take a breath, but it caught in my throat. My legs were shaking. "Grace," Joseph said again, coming closer. I turned to him and with tears spilling down my cheeks I whispered, He hurt me." Joseph's face changed. His mouth opened slightly. "What do you mean?" I took another breath, trying not to collapse under the weight of it all. "The night before our wedding," I said slowly, "he came into my room. He locked the door. He said I was his. And then he did something terrible." Joseph's eyes filled with disbelief.
"No, no."
"Grace, no, your father." I nodded, choking back the sobs. "I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to ruin everything. I didn't want you to look at me differently. I wanted to move on, pretend it never happened. But then I found out I was pregnant." Joseph took a step back like the air had been knocked out of him. His voice was soft. "The baby." I nodded again, my heart breaking into 1,000 pieces. "It's not yours, Joseph. It's his." He sat down on the bed again, his face in his hands. I stood there in silence, watching the man I loved fall apart because of something I never asked for. Something I had carried alone for too long. "I was going to tell you," I whispered. "I just didn't know how." The room was quiet for a long time. He didn't yell. He didn't call me names. He just sat there breathing hard. After what felt like forever, he looked up at me. His eyes were red. Grace, why didn't you trust me? I was scared, I said. I didn't know if you'd still love me. He stood up and came close. You think this makes me stop loving you? No. It breaks me, Grace. It breaks me that you went through this alone. He pulled me into a hug, and I sobbed into his chest. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't carrying the secret alone. I felt like someone was holding a piece of it with me. Later that night, we sat together in silence. Joseph held my hand, but I could see the thoughts racing in his mind. He looked so hurt. Not by me, but by the monster who had done this. Then Joseph said something that surprised me. We have to report him. My body stiffened. No, Joseph, please. He said no one would believe me. He said, I believe you, Joseph interrupted. And if what he's doing now, leaving notes threatening you, isn't enough, then what will be? He's not just dangerous to you. He's dangerous to others too. I shook my head. He's respected in the town. People won't believe it. He'll twist it all. Joseph tightened his grip on my hand. Let them try. I won't let him hurt you again. I wanted to believe that. But I was still afraid. The next morning, Joseph called Emily and told her everything. She came right away, and for the first time, the three of us sat together and made a plan. Joseph wanted to go to the police. Emily agreed. I still hesitated. But before we could take the first step, something else happened. Something worse. That night, as Joseph was locking the front door and I was brushing my teeth, we heard a crash from outside. Then a scream. We rushed to the living room. Joseph opened the door and ran out into the yard. There, lying on the ground by the mailbox, was a small animal. A cat. It had been cut. Blood stained the grass. And next to it, nailed into the side of the fence, was a wooden sign that read, You're mine. I always will be. I screamed. Joseph grabbed me and pulled me back inside. Emily called the police immediately. That night, I sat on the couch, holding my stomach, shaking from head to toe. The baby moved again. Just a tiny flutter. A reminder that despite all this pain, something innocent and pure still lived inside me. But now I knew. My father wasn't just a monster from my past. He was still out there. And he wasn't going to stop. The police came that night. 2 officers knocked on the door just after midnight, lights still flashing quietly outside. They took photos of the dead cat, the blood, and the message nailed to our fence. One of the officers, a tall man named Officer Collins, asked me to sit down and explain everything from the beginning. I hesitated, but Joseph squeezed my hand and nodded. Emily sat close beside me, silently telling me that I wasn't alone. So I told them. I told them everything. I started with the night before my wedding, how my father had come into my room, how he had locked the door, and how he had abused me. My voice trembled. I couldn't look the officer in the eye. I kept staring at the floor, tears dripping onto my knees. But I didn't stop. I told them about the pregnancy, the secret I kept, and the note Joseph found. I told them about the knock at the door and my father's voice saying, That baby is mine. I watched the expression on Officer Collins's face change slowly from confusion to anger. Have you ever reported anything like this before? He asked gently. No, I said softly. I was scared. He told me no one would believe me. Officer Collins nodded. Do you still have the note your husband found? Joseph handed it to him. And what about this message on the fence? Have you seen any strange activity around your house before tonight? I nodded. I saw him once. He was standing outside the yard watching me. But he didn't come in. They took everything down in their notebook. Pictures. Evidence. My statement. They told me they would open an investigation. They also advised me to stay inside for the next few days, and to report immediately if I saw or heard anything else. When they left, I sat in silence for a long time. Joseph closed the door and locked it tight. Emily made me some tea, but my hands were shaking so hard I couldn't hold the cup. How did it come to this? I whispered. He was supposed to protect me. I trusted him. I was his daughter. Emily sat down beside me. Some people don't deserve the titles they carry, Grace. He stopped being your father the moment he touched you that way. I looked down at my belly. And now there's a part of him growing inside me. Joseph leaned forward. It's not his part that matters. This child is yours. It's your blood, your love, your strength that will raise this baby. Not his evil. I nodded slowly, wiping my tears. But how can I ever look at this baby and not remember what he did? There was silence for a moment. Then Joseph said something that pierced through all the darkness. Because this child didn't hurt you. He did. Don't let his sin poison something that could bring healing. I didn't respond. I didn't know how. But something inside me shifted that night. I didn't feel stronger yet, but I did feel less alone. The next morning I stayed in bed late. My body was tired. My soul was more tired. Joseph made breakfast, but I barely touched my food. Emily had stayed over and was already dressed, pacing in the living room. Then there was another knock at the door. I jumped. Joseph opened it slowly. It was Officer Collins again, but this time he wasn't alone. Another officer stood behind him with a serious face. "We have news," he said. My heart started racing. Officer Collins stepped inside. We found more notes. One was stuffed in the church mailbox. Another slipped under the door of the local diner. Both in the same handwriting as the one you gave us. He held up a plastic evidence bag. Inside was a folded piece of paper that read, "She belongs to me. I made her." I closed my eyes. Joseph swore under his breath. "He's trying to scare you into silence," Officer Collins said. "We've opened a formal case and put out an order to bring him in for questioning." I looked up. "Will he go to jail?" "If we get a solid statement and evidence, yes," he said. "We're doing everything we can." When they left, Joseph looked at me and said, "You're doing the right thing, Grace." But I wasn't sure anymore. I felt like no matter how loud I screamed, my father would always be one step ahead, always watching. That evening, I went into the nursery we had just started decorating. It was quiet, peaceful. I looked at the small crib Joseph had built with his own hands. There were little stuffed animals already sitting inside, waiting. I ran my hand over the edge of the crib, and then I heard it. A whisper. Right outside the window. "Grace." I froze. My hands gripped the edge of the crib. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. "Grace," the voice said again, low and quiet. "You can't hide from me." I turned and ran out of the room, screaming for Joseph. He came running, followed by Emily. I pointed toward the window. He grabbed a flashlight and rushed outside. He searched the yard. Nothing.
No footprints.
No sign of anyone. But I knew what I heard. I knew that voice. He was near. He was taunting me. And this time he wasn't just trying to scare me. He wanted to take everything from me. The police came that night. 2 officers knocked on the door just after midnight, lights still flashing quietly outside. They took photos of the dead cat, the blood, and the message nailed to our fence. One of the officers, a tall man named Officer Collins, asked me to sit down and explain everything from the beginning. I hesitated, but Joseph squeezed my hand and nodded. Emily sat close beside me, silently telling me that I wasn't alone. So I told them. I told them everything. I started with the night before my wedding. How my father had come into my room, how he had locked the door, and how he had abused me. My voice trembled. I couldn't look the officer in the eye. I kept staring at the floor, tears dripping onto my knees. But I didn't stop. I told them about the pregnancy, the secret I kept, and the note Joseph found. I told them about the knock at the door and my father's voice saying, "That baby is mine." I watched the expression on Officer Collins's face change slowly from confusion to anger. "Have you ever reported anything like this before?" he asked gently. "No," I said softly. I was scared. He told me no one would believe me. Officer Collins nodded. "Do you still have the note your husband found?" Joseph handed it to him. "And what about this message on the fence? Have you seen any strange activity around your house before tonight?" I nodded. "I saw him once. He was standing outside the yard watching me. But he didn't come in." They took everything down in their notebook. Pictures. Evidence. My statement. They told me they would open an investigation. They also advised me to stay inside for the next few days, and to report immediately if I saw or heard anything else. When they left, I sat in silence for a long time. Joseph closed the door and locked it tight. Emily made me some tea, but my hands were shaking so hard I couldn't hold the cup. How did it come to this? I whispered. He was supposed to protect me. I trusted him. I was his daughter. Emily sat down beside me. Some people don't deserve the titles they carry, Grace. He stopped being your father the moment he touched you that way. I looked down at my belly, and now there's a part of him growing inside me. Joseph leaned forward. It's not his part that matters. This child is yours. It's your blood, your love, your strength that will raise this baby, not his evil. I nodded slowly, wiping my tears. But how can I ever look at this baby and not remember what he did? There was silence for a moment. Then Joseph said something that pierced through all the darkness. Because this child didn't hurt you. He did. Don't let his sin poison something that could bring healing. I didn't respond. I didn't know how. But something inside me shifted that night. I didn't feel stronger yet, but I did feel less alone. The next morning, I stayed in bed late. My body was tired. My soul was more tired. Joseph made breakfast, but I barely touched my food. Emily had stayed over and was already dressed, pacing in the living room. Then there was another knock at the door. I jumped. Joseph opened it slowly. It was Officer Collins again, but this time, he wasn't alone. Another officer stood behind him with a serious face. We have news, he said. My heart started racing. Officer Collins stepped inside. We found more notes. One was stuffed in the church mailbox. Another slipped under the door of the local diner. Both in the same handwriting as the one you gave us. He held up a plastic evidence bag. Inside was a folded piece of paper that read, "She belongs to me. I made her." I closed my eyes. Joseph swore under his breath. He's trying to scare you into silence, Officer Collins said. We've opened a formal case and put out an order to bring him in for questioning. I looked up. Will he go to jail? If we get a solid statement and evidence, yes, he said. We're doing everything we can. When they left, Joseph looked at me and said, You're doing the right thing, Grace. But I wasn't sure anymore. I felt like no matter how loud I screamed, my father would always be one step ahead, always watching. That evening, I went into the nursery we had just started decorating. It was quiet, peaceful. I looked at the small crib Joseph had built with his own hands. There were little stuffed animals already sitting inside, waiting. I ran my hand over the edge of the crib, and then I heard it. A whisper. Right outside the window. Grace. I froze. My hands gripped the edge of the crib. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. Grace. The voice said again, low and quiet. You can't hide from me. I turned and ran out of the room, screaming for Joseph. He came running, followed by Emily. I pointed toward the window. He grabbed a flashlight and rushed outside. He searched the yard. Nothing.
No footprints.
No sign of anyone. But I knew what I heard. I knew that voice. He was near. He was taunting me. And this time he wasn't just trying to scare me. He wanted to take everything from me. Joseph grabbed the knife with shaking hands, his fingers trembling as he peeled the note from the handle. I stood frozen, staring at the shattered glass scattered across the kitchen floor. My heart pounded so loud it echoed in my ears. Emily ran in, gasping as she saw the broken window and the knife. Joseph read the note aloud again, his voice heavy with rage. If I can't have her, I'll take the baby. I dropped to my knees and wrapped my arms around my belly protectively. That was no longer just a threat. That was a promise. My father had crossed the final line. He was ready to take everything from me. Joseph called Officer Collins immediately. Emily sat beside me, rubbing my back, whispering that it would be okay. But even she didn't sound like she believed it anymore. Officer Collins arrived in minutes. This time his partner brought a team to examine the rock, the knife, and the message. They dusted for fingerprints, checked for shoe prints, and questioned the neighbors. But no one had seen anything. No one had heard a thing. It was like my father had become a ghost, slipping in and out of our lives when we least expected it, always staying one step ahead. We need to move her, Officer Collins said to Joseph quietly, but I heard it. She's not safe here anymore. We'll assign a patrol to stay near the house, but it's time to consider a safe house or a temporary shelter until we catch him. Joseph nodded. Anywhere. Just keep her safe. The next morning we packed a small bag. Joseph and Emily helped gather essentials, some clothes, prenatal vitamins, my journal. I walked around the house one last time, feeling like I was abandoning my life. The nursery, the kitchen where we laughed and made pancakes, the living room couch where Joseph would read baby books to my growing belly. I didn't want to leave it behind, but I had no choice. The officers drove us to a shelter 2 towns away. Small, quiet, hidden. They gave us a new number to call in case of emergency and advised us to stay off social media, turn off our phones, and use only the landline in the shelter office. The room they gave us was tiny, but it was safe. Just a bed, a small dresser, and a window with heavy curtains.
No mirrors.
No photos. Nothing that could say Grace was here. Joseph stayed with me. Emily returned home to help the police keep an eye on our house. She promised to check in every day no matter what. Days passed. Then weeks. I started to feel almost normal again. The fear wasn't gone, but it had faded into a quiet hum instead of a scream. I had my first ultrasound at a clinic nearby. Joseph held my hand as we saw the tiny heartbeat flickering on the screen. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. For a moment, just a small moment, I forgot who the baby's biological father was. I didn't see evil in that heartbeat. I saw life, hope, a second chance. The doctor said everything was fine. I was now 5.5 months along. The baby was growing perfectly. When we returned to the shelter that evening, Joseph made me warm tea and read to me. We both smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. But peace doesn't last long when a storm is still chasing you. That night I woke up to a scratching sound. At first I thought it was just the wind brushing the tree outside our window. Then I heard it again. Scratch. Scratch. Slow. Careful. Purposeful. I sat up in bed and looked at Joseph. He was still asleep, his hand resting protectively on my side. I slid off the bed quietly and walked to the window. I lifted the curtain just an inch. What I saw made my blood freeze. There he was, standing outside the shelter. In the darkness. He had found me. I stumbled back and fell against the dresser, knocking over a lamp. The crash woke Joseph. He jumped out of bed, his eyes wide. Grace? What happened? He's here. I screamed. He found us. He's outside. Joseph ran to the window and yanked the curtain open. But the yard was empty. Nothing. Only shadows. Only silence. He turned back to me. Are you sure? I saw him, I said, gasping. He was right there. He was staring at me. Joseph locked the window and called Officer Collins immediately. Within 20 minutes, 2 officers arrived and searched the area. Flashlights scanning every bush, every corner. They found nothing. But I knew what I saw. I knew it. Joseph stayed up the rest of the night, sitting in the chair by the door, holding a bat in his hand. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my hands resting over my belly. He was getting closer. He had found us again. And I knew deep in my heart, he wasn't going to stop until he got what he wanted. The next morning we got a call from Emily. And this time it wasn't just bad news. It was worse. She was crying on the other end. Grace, something's happened. What? What is it? I asked, panic rising. They found something in your backyard. What do you mean? There's a grave, Grace, she said, sobbing. A fresh one. Right under the nursery window. And next to it, a cross with your name on it, and the baby's. I dropped the phone. My knees buckled. Joseph caught me before I hit the floor. The room spun around me. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. The words echoed again in my head like thunder. A grave, with your name and the baby's. Joseph picked up the phone from the floor and shouted, Emily, we're coming now. Call Officer Collins. I shook my head violently. No, Joseph, we can't go back there. He wants us to come back. That's his trap. Emily was still crying on the line. The police are already here. They're digging. It's real, Grace. The grave is real. Joseph turned to me, his eyes dark and tired. Then we stay here. Let the police handle it. I'm not letting you anywhere near that house again. My chest felt tight. My baby twisted gently inside me, as if it could feel my fear. A grave. For me. For the child. He wasn't just threatening us anymore. He was planning something. He wanted to end this his way. And I knew him well enough to know he would. The next few hours were a blur. Officer Collins came to the shelter personally to update us. There was no body, he said. But the grave was deep, dug with care. And that cross, it was carved by hand. Not just a plank of wood. He took his time. This wasn't a random act. Was there a note? I asked, afraid of the answer. Collins nodded. Yes. We found it nailed to the back of the cross. He handed me a photo of it. I didn't even want to touch it, but I forced myself to look. The note read, "You'll return home. One way or another. This ends where it began." I felt like throwing up. I rushed to the tiny bathroom and barely made it in time. My stomach emptied itself as tears rolled down my face. He wanted to bury me. And he was giving me the message loud and clear. He didn't care if I was his daughter. He didn't care if I was pregnant. He wanted control again, and he'd burn the whole world down if he didn't get it. Later that night, after Joseph managed to calm me down, we talked with Collins again. The police were now watching the house around the clock, and they were preparing a full arrest warrant for my father. The evidence, the threats, the notes, the doll, the grave was more than enough. But there was one big problem. They couldn't find him. He had vanished. Disappeared from his workplace, his rented apartment, even from the local streets where everyone used to greet him with smiles and respect. Like a shadow, Collins said. He's just gone. My body was heavy with fear. I barely ate. I couldn't sleep. I kept wondering if he had someone helping him. Someone giving him information. How else could he find our shelter? I hadn't told anyone the location except Emily and the police. Someone was leaking details. Then I remembered something. My journal. Back home I had a journal. I wrote everything in it. My fears, the shelter name, even some of the officers' names. It was hidden under a floorboard in the nursery. I had forgotten all about it. I told Collins, and his face turned pale. If he found that journal, Grace, then yes. He knows everything. Joseph cursed under his breath. We should have burned it. We spent the night planning what to do next. The police offered to move us again. This time to a farther location. A safe house 2 states away. It was a big decision. But before we could even leave, something else happened. Worse. That same night, I woke up to Joseph shouting, "Grace, wake up. Where's your phone?" I jumped up, still groggy. What? What happened? Emily was on the landline. Joseph put her on speaker. Her voice was frantic. "Grace, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to, I swear. I didn't mean to tell him anything." I froze. "What are you talking about?" Emily sobbed. "He called me. I didn't know it was him. He used another number. He pretended to be Officer Collins. He said there was an update and asked me which shelter they moved you to." Joseph's eyes widened. "No, no." Emily broke down. "I only told him the name. I didn't know, Grace, I swear. I thought it was the officer." Silence. Then a sudden crash. A brick flew through the front shelter window. Glass scattered across the room. The lights went out. Joseph pulled me to the floor and covered me with his body. We could hear footsteps outside. Heavy. Purposeful. Then came the sound of something scraping the door. Then the doorknob jiggled. And a voice, muffled but terrifyingly familiar. "Daddy's home." Joseph held me tightly on the floor. His body shielding mine as the broken glass from the window crunched under his knees. My breath came in short, panicked gasps. My hands clutched my belly instinctively, and I could feel the baby squirm, responding to the fear rushing through my blood. The doorknob twisted again. Then again. Click, click, click. He was trying to get in. Joseph reached for the small metal rod he had hidden under the bed. A curtain rod we had sharpened just in case something like this ever happened. He didn't say a word. His jaw was tight. His knuckles white. Then the voice came again just outside the door, barely above a whisper. "Grace, open up. I just want to hold my grandchild." My whole body froze. I felt like my soul had left my skin. Joseph stood and moved silently toward the door. I reached out and grabbed his arm. "No, please don't open it," I begged. "He'll kill you. He'll kill us." He didn't answer. He just crouched by the side of the door, pressing his back against the wall, the rod in hand like a sword. His eyes stayed focused, listening. Bang, bang, bang. The door shook violently. Then suddenly it stopped. Silence. No footsteps. No more whispering. Just stillness. Then Joseph whispered, "He's gone quiet." But I knew better. He was still there. I could feel him, like a dark cloud pressing against the walls. I didn't know what he was planning next, but I knew it wasn't over. We heard sirens in the distance. Joseph ran to the window and peered out through the broken glass. "It's the police," he said. "Collins must have gotten Emily's message." Within seconds, red and blue lights lit up the sky, and I heard the crunch of tires on gravel as patrol cars surrounded the shelter. Officers jumped out with flashlights and weapons drawn. Joseph opened the door carefully. Collins rushed in first, his gun ready. "Where is he?" he barked. "He was right here," Joseph said, pointing toward the door. He was banging, whispering through the cracks. Officers spread out in all directions. Joseph led one to the side of the house, while Collins checked the perimeter with two others. I stood in the corner of the room, trembling, staring at the shattered window. The wind was cold. The curtains flapped like ghosts. Then Collins came back furious. "He's gone," he said. "Vanished again." "Check the cameras," Joseph snapped. He couldn't have gotten far. Another officer radioed back. He disabled the shelter cams. Smashed the power box with a brick. Smart. Planned. This wasn't random. He had studied us. He had waited. And now he was hunting. Collins put us in a police van and drove us straight to the station. "You're not staying there anymore," he said. "He's not playing games now. He's looking to finish it." We were led to a private safe room at the station. Small, windowless. Protected by a steel door and monitored by a camera at all times. I curled up on the cot inside, wrapping my arms around my stomach, trying to breathe. I couldn't take much more. "Why me?" I whispered. Joseph sat beside me, brushing the hair from my face. "Because you stood up to him. You took away his power. That's what monsters hate the most." I nodded, but I didn't feel brave. I felt like a girl again, small, trapped, helpless. Until I remembered something. When I was 15, I had written a letter to my older self. A silly little assignment from school. In it, I told myself that one day I would grow up and build a life that was nothing like his. I promised that I'd be kind, strong, and that I'd protect the people I loved. And now I had someone growing inside me who needed protection more than anyone ever had. That night I decided I would not run anymore. The next morning, Officer Collins had good news. "We found his truck," he said. "Abandoned behind a barn 15 miles from here." Inside was a map circled with pins. One of the pins was this station. My blood went cold. "He was planning to come here?" Joseph asked. Collins nodded. "It looks like he was waiting for the right moment. But there's more. We found a second map. And it had Grace's childhood home circled in red ink." I knew what that meant. "He wants me to go back," I said. "Back where it all started." Collins exchanged a glance with Joseph. "He's trying to trap you." "I know," I said. "But what if we turn the trap around?" Joseph turned to me, alarmed. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe it's time we stop hiding." That night, after careful planning, the police helped us create a sting. I would go back to my childhood home just like he wanted. But this time I wouldn't be alone. Officers would be hidden inside and outside the house. Cameras would be rolling. Snipers positioned on rooftops nearby. Joseph would be in the basement with a radio. I would wear a wire. I was terrified. But I was ready. They dressed me in a black hoodie. No makeup. Hair tied back. I stood inside the old bedroom where it had all happened years ago. The floor creaked the same way. The closet door still squeaked. It all felt like a haunted memory. And then, footsteps on the porch. A slow knock. Then his voice. "Grace, come to the door. Let's end this." I swallowed hard. I reached for the doorknob. My fingers trembled. Then I turned it. Slowly. And pulled it open. There he stood. Older. Wilder. His beard longer, eyes sunken. But that same twisted smile was on his lips. "I told you," he whispered, stepping forward. "You'll always be mine." I took one step back just enough. And behind me I heard Collins yell, "Now!" Time slowed. In the space of one breath, officers stormed the hallway. Red lights from their rifles dotted my father's chest as shouts filled the air. "Hands up! Get down! Don't move!" But he didn't flinch. He just stared at me, eyes wild and full of something that wasn't love, not regret, not even fear. It was possession. That same cruel look he had the night before my wedding. And then, he lunged. Straight at me. I froze. But Joseph wasn't far. He tackled him midair, slamming him into the wall with a force that shook the house. The officers grabbed my father, dragged him to the floor, handcuffed him while he kicked and screamed like a madman. "She's mine! She's mine!" he roared. I backed away, heart racing, cradling my belly protectively. The baby kicked again, soft but strong. And for the first time, I felt peace. Collins knelt beside me. "He's done, Grace. It's over." Tears ran down my face. Not just for what I'd survived, but for what I refused to carry any longer. The shame. The silence. The pain. It would no longer belong to me. As they dragged my father away, I looked him dead in the eyes. He was still snarling, still trying to twist the world into his story. But I didn't see my father anymore. I saw a broken man who lost the last bit of control he thought he had. And I was no longer that little girl. I was a woman. A wife. A mother. I was free. Weeks passed. He was officially charged: aggravated assault, stalking, sexual abuse, and attempted kidnapping. The evidence was overwhelming. The judge denied bail. The trial was scheduled. I didn't go to court. I didn't need to, because the law would handle him now, and I was busy living again. When my baby girl was born 2 months later, I held her close and whispered, "You are not your origin. You are my miracle." She looked just like me. Sweet, soft eyes. Tiny hands that clutched my finger like they never wanted to let go. Joseph cried the moment he saw her. "She's perfect," he said. "She's light in all that darkness." We named her Hope, because even after everything, that's what she was. Emily became her godmother. We moved to a new town, changed our names, started over. Quiet life. Fresh air.
No ghosts.
And I started a journal again, but this time not to hide secrets. This time to tell the truth. For other girls like me. Because silence protects monsters. But truth? Truth sets us free. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched your heart, gave you strength, or helped you see hope in the darkest places, subscribe to my YouTube channel for more real stories of pain, survival, and healing. You're not alone. Not anymore. Broken heart, flex biceps, medium skin tone, sparkles.